Chapter 1, Rebirth at Dawn. The first thing Ling Xue felt was cold. Not the sharp, biting cold of winter winds, but a soft, familiar chill that seeped into her skin the way morning dew settles on fallen leaves. It was a sensation she had not felt in a decade, not since she was a young outer disciple, weak, unnoticed, unguarded. For a disoriented moment, she wondered if she had woken in the afterlife. Then she heard it, a low murmur of voices, the rustle of cheap linen bedding, the faint creak of the wooden beams above her, all of it so mundane, so raw, so painfully alive, that her breath caught. This was her old room. Her throat tightened. Slowly, she lifted her hand and looked at it. The fingers were smaller, softer. No scars, no calluses from years of frantic cultivation and battles she'd barely survived. The skin had a faint tremble to it, as though the body itself was unsure how to exist again. "I'm back," she whispered. Her voice, higher, younger, sounded like an echo from a dream. But the memories were too sharp to be a dream. She remembered the end, the blood, the fire. Yu's eyes, clouded, fading, still searching for her, still believing in her. The ache in her chest tightened until she folded forward, hand pressing hard over her heart as if that could stop the old agony from spilling out. She had lived this life already. And in that life, she had loved someone so deeply that the universe itself seemed cruel for allowing her to fail. Yu, soft-spoken, bright-eyed, always carrying too much gentleness for a world like theirs. Ling Xue had watched her die. Her palms trembled, her breath came uneven, the world blurred as tears burned at the back of her eyes. "No," she whispered fiercely, wiping at her face. "Not this life, not again." She swung her legs over the side of the narrow bed. The weak floorboards groaned under her weight, another painfully familiar sound. When she stood, her knees felt the same fragile wobble they used to have, before years of harsh training had shaped her into someone harder. She hated the weakness, she hated how small she felt. But beneath that hatred was something steadier. Determination. Ling Xue closed her eyes, exhaled slowly, and opened them again with calm purpose. She needed to confirm one thing. She crossed the room to the small wooden desk pressed against the wall. A thin layer of dust clung to its surface, proof that this was still the early morning before she ever cleaned her quarters for the first time. Her eyes drifted to the single item atop the desk. A simple journal, plain cover, hand-stitched spine, faded ink along the edges from years of flipping pages. It was exactly how it looked the day she had first received it. Her breath trembled. "The diary," she whispered. Her fingers hovered above it, afraid to touch. Afraid it wouldn't be real. Afraid it would be, for in her last life, this diary had been a treasure shared only between her and Yu. A place where they wrote secrets, small updates, frustrations with training, hopes neither dared speak aloud. Before Yu died, she had written her last words to Ling Xue in that diary. And Ling Xue had never let the journal go, not even in her dying moments. To see it again, here, in this beginning. She reached out, her fingertips brushed the cover. A faint warmth pulsed beneath her skin, subtle but unmistakable, as though the diary recognized her, acknowledged her return. Then text shimmered across the cover, appearing slowly like ink spreading through parchment. "Diary system, awaiting linked heart." The breath caught in Ling Xue's throat. In her last life, the diary had been ordinary, precious, intimate, but powerless. This was new. Her pulse quickened. Carefully, reverently, she lifted the diary and opened it. The first page was blank except for a single line. "Write your truth." Her hands clenched tight around the edges of the book. She swallowed, feeling the weight of everything she wanted to say, everything she needed to say. But for a long minute, she couldn't bring herself to write anything. Because the diary wasn't truly active yet. It required one thing, a linked heart, Yu's belief, Yu's trust. Only when Yu read her words would they gain power. Slowly, Ling Xue lowered herself onto the chair and drew in a long, shaky breath. "Just the first entry," she murmured. "Just enough to begin." She dipped her brush into ink and let the bristles hover over the page. Her hand trembled. She thought of Yu's smile, her soft voice, her warm hands, her final breath. And then, finally, Ling Xue wrote, "I'm glad to meet you again." Simple, gentle, a truth. The ink settled. The page glowed faintly, barely noticeable in the morning light. A quiet notification unfurled like a whisper in her mind. "The diary awaits Yu's belief." Ling Xue closed the journal with a soft exhale. She pressed the cover to her chest, held it tightly, and let a small, unsteady smile form on her lips. "Yu, this time, I won't lose you." She stood, feeling the world settle around her like a second heartbeat. Tomorrow morning, Yu would read the diary for the first time. And fate would begin to change. Chapter 2, The Diary System Awakens. Ling Xue barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Yu's face, the way she had first seen it in her previous life, soft with morning sleepiness, strands of dark hair falling over her cheek as she rubbed her eyes and tried to act dignified despite the hour. Yu always pretended she didn't mind waking early, but Ling Xue remembered her tiny grumbles, the faint pout that never quite appeared, the way she blinked too slowly. Those tiny details had lived in Ling Xue's heart for years. And now, after dying with Yu's name on her lips, she would see her again. The anticipation was a sharp ache that refused to dull. Before dawn's light crept over the sect's eastern mountain, Ling Xue was already awake. She washed, changed into her freshly folded uniform, the same rough outer sect cloth she had worn as a teenager, and tied her hair back with simple ribbon. Her hands shook once, but she forced them still. She placed the diary gently into her sleeve, letting her fingers rest on the edge of its cover. She'll read it today, Ling Xue told herself, not for reassurance but because she needed to ground herself in something real. And when she does, the diary will respond. But the thought that made her heart twist most was this: she will see my words again. Vulnerable words, true words, and Yu, in all her innocence and sincerity, would believe them. That belief had already cost her everything once. Ling Xue squeezed her hand against her sleeve. "This time," she whispered, "I'll be worthy of it." She stepped outside into the pale early morning chill. The sect was quiet at this hour. Frost clinging to the grass, mist curling low along the ground, faint silhouettes of disciples moving like shadows toward their assigned fields or training squares. A few birds chirped from the nearby orchard, the same orchard where she and Yue had once stolen peaches after a harsh sparring session. Ling Xue allowed herself a tiny, private smile. Then she made her way toward the outer library, where Yue spent every morning cataloging scrolls as part of her duties. It was where they first met, where Yue had first spoken to her, where the diary had begun between them. As Ling Xue approached, the familiar wooden steps creaked faintly beneath her feet. The doors, still closed, smelled of old cedar and dust, comforting, grounding, painfully familiar. She stood there for a moment, breathing in the memories. Then the doors slid open from within. Light spilled across the courtyard floor, and a slender figure stepped out. Yue. Ling Xue's breath stopped. It genuinely, completely stopped. Yue looked exactly, as she had before her first tragedy. Her hair was partially tied up with a simple wooden pin, soft strands falling to frame her delicate face. Her brows were gently curved, her eyes dark and clear. She still wore that same calm composure that always made her seem distant, even though Ling Xue knew how gentle she truly was beneath it. She was carrying a stack of scrolls that were clearly too heavy for her, though she pretended otherwise. Ling Xue knew every detail, every fragile habit, every expression she hid behind practiced serenity. It hit her all at once. She's alive. Her chest tightened painfully, tears stinging at the back of her eyes. Yue paused at seeing her. Not recognition, of course not, but polite acknowledgement, the kind she gave every outer disciple. You're early, Yue said softly, her voice like water over stones, quiet, soothing, unchanged. Ling Xue swallowed hard. She hadn't prepared for how overwhelming hearing that voice again would be. I woke early, Ling Xue managed, trying to keep her voice steady. Yue nodded, adjusting the scrolls in her arms. Her fingers slipped on the top one, the parchment shifting dangerously. Ling Xue stepped forward instinctively. Let me help. Yue blinked, surprised, but the faint warmth of her smile was exactly as Ling Xue remembered. Thank you. Ling Xue took half the scrolls, careful not to brush Yue's fingers too long. Even that small contact made her heart clench with longing. They stepped inside together. The library smelled of ink, dust, and old wood, the comforting sense Ling Xue associated with Yue's presence. Sunlight filtered through high windows, illuminating rows of shelves. As Ling Xue set the scrolls down, her sleeve brushed the diary. The movement reminded her sharply of why she had come so early today. Yue noticed the moment Ling Xue's expression changed. Is something wrong? Yue asked softly. Ling Xue shook her head. No, I just remembered something I needed to give you. Yue tilted her head. Give me. Ling Xue hesitated, fingers resting on the diary's smooth cover. The moment felt fragile, sacred, like the turning of fate was hidden in this breath. She pulled the diary from her sleeve. Yue's eyes widened ever so slightly. This is a journal, Ling Xue said quietly. I thought we could share one. I'll write in it. You can read it, and maybe write back. Yue blinked. She looked down at the diary again, then up at Ling Xue. A faint ping touched the tips of her ears. No one has ever asked me to share a journal before. Ling Xue's throat tightened. In the previous life, this moment had been so casual. Two students bonding over written notes. Something small, something pure. This time, the weight of it pressed on Ling Xue like an ocean. You don't have to, Ling Xue added quickly, trying to control the trembling in her voice. But I wrote something already. If you want to read it. Yue hesitated only a breath before accepting the diary with both hands, cradling it gently like it was something precious. I would like to, Yue said softly. Thank you, Ling Xue. Then she opened the diary. Page 1, the first line, I'm glad to meet you again. Yue froze. Her eyes softened. A small exhale escaped her lips, gentle, trembling, almost emotional. Ling Xue watched, heart hammering so loudly she feared Yue could hear it. For a moment, time held its breath. Then, a warm pulse rippled through Ling Xue's body. Not visible, not audible, but unmistakable. A small, gentle notification brushed her mind like a feather across her thoughts. Yue believes your words. Trust level 1. You have gained. Beginner breathing method, heart steady breath. Ling Xue's hand curled slightly, nails pressing into her palm. It worked. Yue lifted her head, expression softer than Ling Xue expected, almost shy. It's a very kind thing to write. Her eyes flicked away, then back. I'm glad to meet you too. Ling Xue felt her breath catch. Not with shock, with grief, with longing, with overwhelming, aching relief. Yue was alive, believing in her, smiling at her, and for the first time since her rebirth, Ling Xue felt a small spark of hope she barely dared hold on to. Maybe this time, fate can be rewritten. Chapter 3, a familiar, heartbreaking smile. Yue held the diary close to her chest as if it were something delicate, something warm. Ling Xue remembered that gesture, the gentle curl of Yue's fingers along the spine, the way she treated books and scrolls like living creatures. She used to joke that Yue cared more for parchment than people. But Ling Xue knew better. Yue cared deeply, she just hid it well. Seeing her cradle the diary again, Ling Xue felt time collapse in on itself, folding past and present into one tender, aching moment. Ling Xue, Yue said softly, pulling her from her thoughts, you wrote this morning. Ling Xue nodded, afraid her voice would shake too much if she spoke. Yue looked down again at the simple line. I'm glad to meet you again. Her lips curved, soft, small, almost shy. A smile that didn't show teeth, only warmth. It was the exact same smile she had worn the first time she had read one of Ling Xue's notes in their past life. That smile had always undone her. Ling Xue's stomach twisted painfully. Her chest tightened. A wave of emotion surged, grief, relief, longing, and she had to look away, pretending to study the shelves. If you noticed her reaction, she didn't comment. Instead, she turned a page, curious, searching for more. When she realized Ling Xue had written only that one line, her brows eased, and she nodded as though she approved of the restraint. All right back, Yue said. Her voice was quiet but steady. After I finish my morning work. Ling Xue blinked, coming back to herself. You don't have to rush. I know you're busy. Yue shook her head, a faint blush dusting her cheeks. I want to. Ling Xue's breath caught, not because of the words, but because she remembered this exact exchange from their first life. Yue had spoken with the same softness, the same earnest sincerity. Back then, Ling Xue hadn't realized what that gentleness meant. But now she could feel every layer of affection Yue had once carefully hidden. She was living through it again. And she wasn't sure her heart could bear it. Yue set the diary carefully on a clean spot on her desk, treating it like something precious. Ling Xue forced her breath to steady. She had to focus. She had a mission in this new life. Protect Yue, grow stronger, rewrite fate, and strength began with cultivation. The warmth still hummed faintly beneath her skin, the result of Yue's belief activating the diary system. Ling Xue closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel the new technique settle into her meridians. Heart steady breath, a simple foundational breathing method. In her last life, she had struggled months to learn even a weaker version. Now, it flowed into her as naturally as air. Ling Xue breathed in, the world softened, she breathed out, her heartbeat slowed, steadied, cleared. Yue noticed almost immediately. Ling Xue, she asked, voice tinted with surprise. Your aura feels different. Ling Xue opened her eyes slowly. Does it? Yue stepped closer, just a single step, but enough that Ling Xue could smell the faint floral scent of Yue's hair oil, a memory so vivid it made her throat tighten. Yue peered at her, eyes narrowing slightly in concentration. It's subtle, but, her voice lowered, you seem calmer, more centered. Ling Xue swallowed. That was one way to describe it. Another would be, I am desperately trying not to fall apart in front of you. She offered a small smile. I've been practicing. Yue blinked in admiration. Already, at this hour. Ling Xue nodded. Yue's expression softened. You're working hard. Ling Xue looked away. I have to. For your sake, she didn't say. For my promise to you. For the fate I refuse to repeat. A pause settled over them. Not uncomfortable, never uncomfortable with you, but heavy with unspoken things. Yue cleared her throat softly. Oh, I meant to ask. This diary, is it something you made? Ling Xue hesitated. The truth was both simple and impossible. It came back with me, she whispered before she could stop herself. Yue blinked. Came back. Ling Xue froze. She hadn't meant to say that. Not aloud. Not yet. Not when Yue had no reason to suspect anything strange. But Yue's face was open, curious, with no suspicion at all, because you trusted easily, even now. Ling Xue forced a smile, gentle and reassuring. I mean, it's been with me a long time. Yue relaxed, nodding. I see. The relief that washed through Ling Xue almost made her knees weak. They spent the next hour in quiet harmony, Yue organizing scrolls, Ling Xue assisting without being asked, moving exactly the way she remembered she had moved a decade ago. But her body told a different story now. Her movements were smoother, her breathing softer, her awareness sharper. The diary system was working. While Yue sorted the last stack of scrolls for the morning, Ling Xue slipped outside to breathe fresh air. The courtyard was empty, the early light washing over the stone tiles like pale gold. She pressed a hand to her chest. The world around her was new and familiar, fragile and hopeful all at once. I'm really here, she whispered. Yue was really here. A slow, trembling exhale left her. But it's not enough. Not yet. The warmth of her first diary reward flickered faintly, like a tiny flame in her dantian. She needed more strength, more trust, more belief. But not blindly, she reminded herself. In the previous life, Yue had always believed her too easily. That trust had been turned against her in the end, when Ling Xue failed to protect her. This time, trust had to be earned slowly, gently, properly. Ling Xue would not manipulate Yue's heart. She would protect it. As she turned back toward the library doors, they slid open, and Yue stepped out, diary in hand. She held it carefully, as if she had been thinking about it constantly since Ling Xue left. Her cheeks were slightly pink. I wrote something, Yue said quietly. Ling Xue blinked. Already. Yue nodded. I didn't want to wait. Her expression was shy, hopeful, sincere. Ling Xue felt the world stop. May I read it now? She asked. Yes, Yue said, voice barely above a whisper. I want you to. Yue held the diary out in both hands, an offering. Ling Xue accepted it gently, afraid her trembling fingers might betray how much this meant. She opened to the fresh page. Yue's handwriting was small, elegant, and unmistakably hers. I'm glad to meet you too. I hope we become close friends. Ling Xue's breath shattered, her vision blurred. A pulse of warm energy surged into her body, stronger than before, clearer, deeper. A new notification whispered in her mind. Yue believes you with her whole heart. Trust level 2. You have gained. Silent step, early movement technique. But Ling Xue barely heard it. Because Yue was looking at her with that same gentle, hopeful eyes. Because the girl she loved so painfully she broke, was here, alive, writing to her again. Ling Xue, Yue said softly, is that all right? Ling Xue closed the diary carefully, her hands shaking. Then she looked at Yue. It's more than all right, she whispered. Her voice broke. It's everything I wanted.